Now, what is this exactly? This is going to be a series of recordings, essentially of me just kind of ranting into the microphone about any given topic. Sometimes, a multitude of topics, but typically there would just be one central theme of each episode. Um, this originally started as a podcast that I had actually put up into an RSS feed, so people could download um, under a different name, but the name really didn't quite make a lot of sense. So I made a fancy new little graphic and changed the name, and it's essentially the same thing as it was before. And I may actually indeed sort of like port over the previous episodes, that were under the different masthead to this one, but that will come sometime in the future, if at all. Um, but yeah, I mean, the topics that I'll be rambling about are usually, almost always, actually, in fact, going to be something kind of philosophical in nature, I would say. Just my opinions on things, broad topics, of which I attempt to craft my view on. Um, Sometimes successfully, most of the times probably not. Let's be honest. Um, but other than that, there's not really going to be any kind of specific structure to it. I don't like to have a format or an outline to this kind of thing. It really just kind of distracts me from what I want to do, which is to just turn on the microphone and hopefully make sense by the end of it. I can't promise that that will happen again, and there'll be lots of equivocation, too much equivocating, in fact, because I don't have a script, I don't have an outline, I don't take notes. Something I think I have something to say about a certain topic, and I turn on the microphone and record it. That's what happens, and so the degrees of quality may vary greatly, and I don't like to have an outline again because it distracts me from what I want to do. It makes me focus on style and not substance, and style is fairly important to me, at least in terms of the content that I like to present to people. It makes me focus on style and not substance. It makes me focus on polish and not point. And I don't want to do that. And something different that I've decided to do this time is to upload these to YouTube. I'll probably have an RSS feed for it as well, and when that does happen, I will of course put the appropriate information below the video here, so you'll be able to automatically have these downloaded for your listening aggravation or enjoyment or whatever it is exactly that whatever reason you personally have to listen to this, which I'm assuming isn't going to be a lot of you, and I'm assuming isn't going to be for the kind of reasons that I hope. Which I'm fine with. I'm totally fine with people just listening to these two to laugh at me and to, you know, realize that my opinions on things aren't exactly accurate. So, I'm fine with that. Um, so yeah, with that out of the way, with that kind of introduction out of the way, this won't be happening in future episodes. I'll simply state the title, say welcome back, state that I'm slightly amiss, which is true, and then I'll just move on to the topic. That's how it's going to go from now on. But what I wanted to actually talk about today is something that it bothers me a great deal, and I guess what I want to talk about is the notion of perception versus intent, specifically relating to social interaction. And the reason it bothers me, this topic, is because I personally think that a lot of people, especially people of my generation and people of my age, place too much emphasis on perception and not intent. And it's seriously, 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 I think, you know, degradates interaction between people. I mean, it essentially makes interaction between people completely pointless. Because if you're focusing too much on how you perceive what somebody else has said, then you are absolutely and utterly doomed to completely, perhaps, miss the point of what somebody is saying. Now, I'm not saying that the way that somebody presents themselves is not important. Of course, it's important how your intent is perceived, but I think the people who are hearing your words are perhaps not even questioning what your intent is at all. And I think that's a huge point. I think that's a huge error in the kinds of things that most people do. And to be entirely honest with you, I think that this kind of thing is most prevalent in the interaction between male and female. And this is kind of actually a good follow-up to the very last recording I did of these under the previous masthead, which was sort of about that same thing, my thoughts on men and women, which is never something I'm able to speak intelligently on. But yeah, kind of a good follow-up to that, and I may indeed port that episode over sometime in the future, perhaps even next, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, so what exactly am I talking about here? Somebody says something, and the reaction that you get is based solely on how the person who heard it perceives it. And I think people nowadays especially are so kind of, I think, bombarded with information, and they're so used to being led to a certain conclusion by people they know, by their parents, by media, that I think that they're led to believe that their initial perceptions on something are always the most accurate perception of what's happening. And I think that is totally the opposite of the truth. That's totally the opposite of the truth. I think that somebody's initial impression is very much important, yes, and should always be considered, but it shouldn't be the primary and sole barometer of what you think the truth is. It should actually kind of be not the most important thing. You measure what truth is to you. It should be secondary to that entirely, I think. I think that intent should be the sole and final barometer of what is deemed to be truth. And I think the way you get to intent is by asking questions, which I think people don't do. So let's say I say something to you, and you find it offensive and aggravating, and you make that apparent to me in some way. You said this, you're a fucking asshole, you're an idiot, kiss my ass, etc., etc., etc. But you don't bother to wonder if my intent of the statement was something completely different. You are solely... I mean, I don't mean you. Let's just say it's me. Let's say you say something and I get mad by it. You say something and I get pissed off at you, and my immediate reaction is to call you dumb, is to call you stupid, and that's actually kind of true in my case, certainly. I'm not one to limit myself from calling somebody else dumb, and perhaps I should be, but that's a separate issue in and of itself. But my first reaction is to call you stupid, and I don't even consider what your intent was. I mean, perhaps your intent wasn't to offend me, or however I happen to negatively perceive your words or actions. Perhaps your intent was completely the opposite of that. Just to point out something that you see as fact, or to point out something that is fact. To point out your opinion, to point out a fact, whatever it is. And the intent clearly wasn't to make me upset. Now, I'm sort of ragging on the recipients of intent here, but I think that the givers of intent are just as liable for the reaction that their intent causes than perceivers are to misinterpreting it. You know what I mean? I think that lots of people who say things that affront people, sometimes that's their intention, and when they're asked about it, they lie about it. Now, to me, that is worse than misperception, of course, because I think misperception is based on a lack of information, and if you're seeking that information, specifically when we're talking about subjective things, and you don't give that person your full intent, or you cloud it in misdirection, or whatever it happens to be, I think that then the people who put forth that intent are responsible for, the meltdown of the dialogue, if you will. So if somebody asks you what your intent is and you lie about it, then you absolutely have no right to your opinion on that topic anymore, in my opinion. Your point and your intent is completely moot and invalid as far as I'm concerned after that point. But I think, at the same time, most people don't even bother to ask what your intent is. They don't care. They're strictly concerned with how your intent is perceived by them, by others, by whatever. I mean, even if you were to sit there and explain this to them, they wouldn't care. If your intent is perceived incorrectly or as offensive to somebody, they don't even care beyond that point. Even if they weren't to ask questions and you were to point out that they weren't seeking your intent or seeking to understand your intent, they wouldn't care, because to them, perception is the absolute end-all be-all of whatever. I don't know. It's the end-all be-all of all interaction whatsoever, and that is completely wrong. And I find this to be actually people's opinion. Like, this is actually what they think philosophically. They might not sit and ramble into a microphone about it like I am, but that's actually what they believe if you were to ask them. And why? That's so stupid. That kind of post-structuralist, agreed upon meanings of language really have no meaning, bro, because no, that's fucking stupid. And anybody who thinks that is dumb. I don't understand how you could logically sit there and think that. I don't get it. I mean, can somebody tell me if they do think that? I mean, I really would like to have a reasonable dialogue with somebody about that, because it doesn't make any damn sense. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I don't get it. And I find it to be the truth most often with young people, and especially present between men and women. I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. I mean, and just to put it another way, you hear the adage all the time, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that is absolutely the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Words have meaning, and sentences convey meaning. It doesn't matter how you say it, it matters what you say. It is totally the opposite of what most people think, and I don't understand the people who think that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. No. You're focusing way too much on perception. You care more about how somebody else's words are perceived by you and others than what they're actually saying. How can you stand there and say that? It doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. It's stupid. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. What? What? That doesn't make any sense. And it can go in the opposite direction as well. Of course, when most people say that, they're talking about times when they're perhaps not getting along with somebody, and it's mostly meant in a negative context. But, so, if we were to follow that logic, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So if I were to say, you're fucking beautiful, you're so beautiful, like that would be bad because of how I said. Okay, well, maybe that's a bad example. Because that does sound bad when I say it that way. But I think that in most cases that's the only thing that's used. Like let's say that I were to say it that way and you weren't arguing. Would it still be bad? No, of course not. No, that would be good things to say. I mean, it would be said in a very weird way, and it might perhaps be a little bit awkward, but it's not how you say it, it's what you say. And that's important. Yes, okay. The example I gave was probably a pretty bad one, because it sounds like you're being a sarcastic asshole. But even if somebody is being a sarcastic asshole, context needs to be considered. If you're in a heated debate with somebody, they're not going to say things to you in the nicest way, but it's still important to listen to what they say, and not how it's said, or how it's presented, or whether you put a smiley face at the end of it. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't matter. It doesn't make any sense to strictly base your interpretation on that alone. That's stupid. Who does that? Really? It's not a. It's a conversation. It's a dialogue. It's not a fucking painting. Right? It doesn't matter. It matters how it's presented. Yes, of course. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. But that's not the most important thing. If you're looking at a painting, then yes, that's the most important thing. How you perceive it and whether or not you like it and all that subjective bullshit. But when you're talking to somebody, that's not the most important barometer of the conversation. No. Now, yes, of course, you do yourself a great service to have your words perceived in a way that's good by other people, yes. Anybody who says otherwise is dumb, of course. But I think it's gone around way too far it's gone around the bend way too far in that again is strictly what people look at, and that should be rallied against. That should be argued against. That should be acted against, because that is retarded. It's stupid. And I think the root cause of it is just bad communication, just bad social skills. I mean, I'm not the most social person on the planet. In fact, I would consider myself pretty antisocial, to be honest with you. I talk into a microphone. I talk to myself. I don't talk to someone. Yes, I champion genuine discourse and an understanding between one another, but of course I don't actually practice that. I just talk to myself into a microphone, and I talk to myself playing video games, right? Yes, okay, I understand that there's kind of a slight hypocrisy when I say that. But still, if I were to talk to somebody, those would be the kind of things that I would champion. Still, so I think the point stands. But I think the root cause of it, again, is bad social skills. And it's so funny to me to see how many people claim... It's funny to me to see people claim that they have great social skills, and, oh, look, I have tons of friends, I'm very socially gifted. No, you're not. You've just cohabitated with other morons. That doesn't mean you have good social skills. That just means you've chosen to hang out with people who suck at it as bad as you do. That's all I'm trying to say. Well, I'm actually trying to say a lot more than that, but you get the idea. Forgive my emails here. But again, it's communication. I think it's... And in ways, it's... In ways, and perhaps not most of the time, but a lot of the time, it's intentional when people do that. Like they want you to suss out their meaning, and they don't even put any effort into the way their intent is. It's so stupid. The very people who think that perception is the most important are the very kinds of people who won't explain their intent because they just want you to perceive it and understand exactly what they're trying to say. What? What? You can't be stupid on both fronts. You can't just be completely and utterly incapable of, I don't know. You can't just be completely and utterly incapable of explaining yourself. Words have meaning, like I said, and meaning is important. And you have to explain yourself. And if something somebody says is offensive, you need to ask them why. And then if at that point you fail to explain what your intent is, then that's your fault. You have to explain it. Intent is important. Perception doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but it's that shouldn't be the focus, right? And it happens all the time when people say, like, oh, you say, hey, what's up? And they're like, I'm fine. And that's it. And they don't go on to explain themselves. Just say, I don't really want to talk to you right now. Can we talk later? What's so hard about that? Why do I have to eke that out of your intent? Just explain it. I shouldn't just be able to perceive what. No, you're an idiot. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Anybody who does that is stupid. And again, that happens a lot between men and women. I mean, I shouldn't speak for everybody. It's happened to me plenty of times, and I'm not going to say that I'm not guilty of it myself. Of course, I'm just as culpable of the things I rant about here as anybody else. But it's just stupid. I think people need to talk. They need to state their opinions. Most things are subjective. All right, if we're talking about a math problem or grammar rules or something, then yes, then somebody can state unequivocally facts and whatnot. But I think most interaction between people is about subjective things, and I think people need to state their opinion and not be so scared that they're going to come off like an asshole or however they're afraid to be perceived. If somebody doesn't understand, if somebody doesn't perceive you correctly, and you've made an adequate attempt to explain it, that's their problem. That's not your problem. Why do people worry so much about it? I don't get it. Anyways, that's all I really wanted to talk about this time. Of course, I always appreciate any kind of feedback you guys want to give. This might be going out to a wider audience now that I've decided to upload it to YouTube. Um, but even that being the case, I still very much look forward to any feedback you guys have. Even if you don't send feedback, I do want to thank you very much for listening. I'm Slightly Amiss, and I'll see you next time.